There we go. I'm recording my audio now. Excellent. This is going well. So we are going to start by talking about the types of editing. For those who are watching this on YouTube, the beginning of this, I didn't cover anything that you missed auditorially, so don't worry. All right, so the types of editing are developmental editing, line editing, copy editing, and proofreading. Those, generally speaking, are the four main types of editing that folks will recognize as the ones that are standard. There are some different definitions. You might see some different words used. I've heard substantive editing used to refer to developmental editing. I've also heard that used to refer to line editing back in the day. So it's kind of one of those, it's wibbly. So I prefer these four terms. That is how my brain works, but you will hear others in the industry. But we are going to also define them. Developmental editing is big scope stuff. So it's looking at structure or character development, or it's looking at various different pieces of all of that kind of broad structure stuff. So if we're going to be helping an author reorganize their book, or if you're doing a nonfiction book, you might be helping an author like, okay, this is the flow of information. For me, a lot of the times I'm helping authors do pacing with developmental work because they've kind of messed up the flow of tension in their work and need to figure it out, or there are big loopholes in the plot, stuff like that. So that's developmental editing. Line editing is actually my favorite kind of editing. It is where you get down into the text on a pretty intense level. It's where we look for adverbs and where we look for things like to be verbs and passivity, and helping the sentences really like turn into really good quality prose and help the author's voice really come through and shine. That is one of the main parts of line editing, is really like bumping up the author's voice and showing the world that voice in the best way possible. That is honestly my passion. That's my favorite, but I do all of these. Then you have copy editing, which is focused on the technical aspects of things. So it will be punctuation, syntax, whether or not the quotation marks are facing the right way, because we've all run into that, or if they're straight, curly, all that stuff. That's in copy editing and focused really on making sure the punctuation and grammar is correct. It may also include clarity. If something is phrased in a manner that's just obtuse and you can't figure it out, that might be copy editing. Usually that's somewhere between line and copy. There's a lot of overlap. Usually when I line edit, I also copy edit because I can't fix the prose without fixing the punctuation because it makes my brain itch. And that's a problem for me. And finally, you have proofreading. Proofreading and copy editing are also often conflated by people. Technically, proofreading is the act of looking at the book in this final format before it goes to the printer, or after a proof copy has been printed, hence proofreading. And you are also looking for typesetting errors, like is there an indentation at a chapter start? Is the font the same, consistent through the entire book, or did somebody accidentally turn a paragraph into Arial by mistake? Is that a thing that happened? So that is one of the things of proofreading, and you can also catch last-minute typos like though and through and some of those other ones. I usually, if nothing else, suggest for authors that they have at least two editors, one to do developmental line and copy maybe, or at least, a couple of those, and then a separate one to do proofreading, because the new and fresh eyes will help catch extra errors that maybe the other person didn't catch. But those are the types of editing and how I define them. If anybody defines them differently or knows of a different definition of them, please let me know in the chat. I would be interested to hear other viewpoints on that score, but that's my understanding of them from this. I didn't introduce myself. Those of you who don't know me, which I don't think is very many of you by now, but if you don't know me, I'm E. I have been in the editing publishing industry for about 15 years now. I have worked for 2 indie presses. Currently, I run one. I've edited as a freelancer for a lot of people, and I've been working really hard at this. I'm also one of the people running the conference, and I was diagnosed as autistic and ADHD in November. I always knew I was ADHD. The autism was a surprise, but it's not a surprise to anybody who's known me longer than 5 minutes, so whatever. So that is more or less how I look at things. And Megan Harris says, yeah, that's how she defines things and combines line and copy. I do too. I can do copy separately from line, but if I'm doing line editing, I can't not do copy editing. It just, ugh. All right. With those definitions out of the way, we're going to talk about skill identification. So this segment is going to discuss what skills and knowledges you have that might be useful for your clients. And this is more than just knowing grammar and punctuation, by the way. It is absolutely, it includes that, but this is more than that because you have skills and knowledge that you might not realize is going to be useful to clients until you come across somebody who needs it. And I'm going to talk about that later. It also dovetails into the special interest thing. So when looking for your personal skill set and what that means in terms of your editing and finding your niche, look at what training you have. This doesn't necessarily mean editorial training. This could be training like you've trained as a chef. You know how to do horseback riding or whatever, like training you've had, what education you have. For example, I do not have a degree in anything English. My degree is actually in European history. I almost got a minor in creative writing, but I didn't. But my degree is in it's in European history. I focused on the Renaissance period mostly. And I've studied Rome and other places, but I'm not going to break that down too much. That education that you have, I also have education in business. And that education, how could that help your clients? What experiences have you had that could help your clients? Being neurodivergent, I also have PTSD. I have a number of, being born female, I have experiences that I can use to help authors understand certain things they might not. Like if I come across somebody who's writing PTSD badly, I can understand and help them understand PTSD better because I am that person. I'm also physically disabled. I know what it's like to live in chronic pain. I know what it's like to have a joint dislocate. I know what it's like to have major surgery or serious injuries. And those are things I can use to help clients understand certain elements of their writing. Now, I'm not saying you need to disclose all of these experiences to your clients. You do not. But it does give you unique insight that you can use to help your clients understand better what it is they're writing about. And it can also help you identify things in a manuscript that somebody who might not have that experience wouldn't know. Like if you're a trained chef and somebody's cooking food in a professional kitchen, you might be like, oh, that isn't how that dish is prepared. And you could use that information. So you don't have to disclose things in order to have that information be helpful. Also, in looking at the different kinds of editing, there's the thing that we often miss is which one sounds like the most fun. Proofreading a science article on a subject I don't understand sounds like the most boring thing I can imagine. I would not do well with that. Or handling really like sticky business stuff, like corporate things. I would not enjoy that. It would be awful for me. So that is not something I would do. It's not a job I would take because, please do not. What genres do you like to read? That is another thing. Like if you're a big reader, what do you like to read? And so what tropes and understandings might you have of those genres? And if you like to read those genres, you might like to edit those genres too. It might be more fulfilling and more fun for you than just editing something that is unpleasant and dry and boring. And yeah, Joe, you're absolutely correct. And okay, so some of you might struggle to edit your favorite genres. That's totally fair. But other people might find that more rewarding and more fun. So it's something to consider, but it obviously isn't like one size fits all. If you find that editing a genre you love is painful, then don't work in that genre. That's totally fair. And finally, what things do you do in life that give you unique insight into those kinds of editing? For example, several of you know by now, and I'm not quiet about this, I do historical reenactment. I'm a member of the SCA, and I'm a fencer. And handling swords, and I studied Japanese katana work for a decade. Handling swords means that when my authors come to me with a sword fight scene, I can look at that sword fight scene and be like, this is entirely wrong. And not to say that people can't do things for fun. Like, anime sword fight scenes are totally different than somebody who's trying to portray a realistic sword fight scene, and having somebody use a rapier like a cruciform sword or something like that, that just the weapon does not work that way. And I come across that in historical fantasy all the time, where people try and use weapons in ways that those weapons were not used, or armor doesn't work that way. And since I've physically been in armor, I have handled these weapons and I know how they're used, I can use that to help my clients, and it satisfies a personal interest of mine. On the next slide, we're talking about here how special interests factor in, which does dovetail with my SCA stuff because one of my special interests is history. I am a giant nerd. But our special interests as neurodivergent people mean that we have really, usually often very deep and specific interests in things. So say somebody is really and deeply interested in snow, like weather. If you are really deeply interested in weather, then being a science editor might be incredibly satisfying for you. Or if you're working on a book, say it's a thriller and they're talking about like atmospheric weather conditions interfering with certain kinds of communication, you could, if you know that thing, use that knowledge and be like, that is not how that works. Or that is how that works, or you can help the author understand it. That knowledge and that passion helps us provide unique insight to authors who are working in those spheres, in those areas of study. And it gives us that really deep and complete knowledge that we can then use to share with other people. And like one of my special interests, as it is for many of us, I'm guessing since you're here, is language itself. Like the way different words, like there's no such thing as a true synonym, and what the really nuanced details of different words mean and the emotions they evoke and all that stuff, like that is absolutely a special interest of mine, and I suspect it's a special interest for many of us because that's why we're editors. And that depth of understanding and that depth of knowledge is something that we can really draw on, but not all of our special interests are necessarily things that are writing specific or writing related. So my husband, he was really into metals and machining. And if I have a question about like, okay, so I have this fight scene and I would like to have somebody do something that breaks through this armor, I can ask my husband the ways in which that would work, and he can provide me that data. And so if you are as an editor, whatever sphere you are really interested in might actually play into your editing. And if you have a sphere you're really passionate about, finding a type or sphere of editing that utilizes that passion is one of the things that will be really useful to your clients. And it also can help shape which genres you work in. My deep affection for history means that I am an excellent historical fiction editor. I am an excellent fantasy, like high fantasy editor. Those things all dovetail into my special interests, and since I know so much about those things, it helps me choose the genres I work in. Whereas I am not into sci-fi, it's not my thing most of the time. Somebody who likes science, who really is interested in those things, even if it's not editing related, might find real satisfaction in working in sci-fi. So looking at your special interests and looking at the interests you have and the skills you have and the experiences you have can help you work in certain genres. Also, if you have certain trauma and such, you will know what genres to avoid. The importance of reasonable. Wow, this went really quick. So importance of reasonable here. We have to learn to identify what reasonable is, because reasonable is a really complex thing. We are used to being pushed really hard by people who don't respect our boundaries and don't understand our abilities, our inabilities, our struggles, our triumphs, or what we need to be successful. You're used to people saying, well, everybody can deal with that, why can't you? So I know we're all word nerds here, but I have the definition of reasonable on the screen because moderate and fair. That is the thing I want to key in on here. Moderate and fair, not extreme or excessive. What is reasonable, and how do I identify it when we're dealing with clients? And how do we consider what is a reasonable scope of work for us, and how far should we push ourselves? So reasonable, as I mentioned, neurodivergent people are frequently just taken terrible advantage of. Like, that's a really common thing for us. We're pushed beyond our boundaries, pushed beyond our means, like driven into burnout, and we're used to being just accepting that behavior and being just knowing that we are the unreasonable ones because we can't handle somebody being really loud in another space and focus, or we can't focus because we are being told to make eye contact with somebody, so I'm so focused on their eye contact that I have no idea what they're saying. We're used to being told that we are the unreasonable ones for having these needs, and that is not actually the case. But that means our boundaries of what's reasonable get really, like, messy, and it's hard, and it's uncomfortable. So relearning what reasonable means for us is really important. And finding, and when people don't recognize what is reasonable for us, and when we don't assert ourselves, that results in us dealing with unfair expectations, like a rush edit that will really mess me up, or being pushed into editing a book that I'm really not comfortable with, or dealing with a client that I'm really not comfortable with, or handling a situation I'm really just not okay with, but because I feel like I guess this isn't reasonable to feel that I should be forced to edit a book that is directly related to trauma I had because I still have feelings about it. No, that isn't reasonable. If you are not comfortable with a client, with a project, with a book, if you are not comfortable with a timeline, those are reasonable things. And you are allowed to say no to them, because not identifying and placing reasonable expectations on yourself leads to perfectionism, which is just awful, RSD, or rejection sensitive dysphoria. If you don't know what that is, I will talk to you about that later, and burnout. And autistic burnout and RSD are horrible. And the idea that we aren't living up to somebody else's measurement and we're the unreasonable ones feels horrendous, and we deal with it so often. And focusing in on what is reasonable for me, I'm going to define what reasonable looks like in the next slide. So let's get there. So what is reasonable? How do we define reasonable for ourselves? Does this timeline account for free time and recovery? And free time means time not working, you pursuing a special interest, hanging out with your family, getting dinner with your, going out to dinner with your partner, or whatever it is that you're looking at there. What is, free time? Can I do this in this amount of time? Okay, maybe. But does that amount of time mean that I'm sacrificing myself or my family or something that is important to me? There are times when we should push, and I'm going to talk about that one. But next is, are these standards achievable by the average person? We may not be average, which isn't to say we're better or worse, but we are not average people. Could the average human being make this happen? And if the answer is no, it's not reasonable to put that expectation on ourselves. Is our time and skill being respected by our client? If our time and skill and expertise and knowledge is not being respected by our client, then we are not doing something that is reasonable. It is not reasonable to expect that of us. My cat is walking across my desk. That is why I'm all higgledy-piggledy here. Monster, please. There we go. And are we expected to do the job of more than one person? A good friend of mine who is autistic keeps getting into jobs, and he keeps getting expected to do, like, okay, I got into this job to edit, but now they want me to copyright articles and then edit my own articles, and then I have to post them, and then I have to do all this other stuff. Like, the scope creep is real. Are we being expected to do a job of more than one person? Is that it? And if we are, no, that's not reasonable. And it's okay to say no to that. Are we being pushed or harried? Now, do we have somebody breathing down our neck saying, hey, this is the deadline, you have no choice, this is the deadline? I mean, sometimes that's a thing that exists in a corporate environment, or if we're not working for ourselves. But if you are being really, like, hammer and tongs pushed by a client, that is not okay. That's not reasonable. Is your workload at a place where it is repeatable? 5 days a week, because you should have at least 2 days off, or 4 days a week if that's how you want to do, 52 weeks a year. Could you do this long term? Because editing is a profession. And in order to engage in that profession, we have to be able to do it over time. It has to be repeatable, because I want to be doing this for the next 30 years of my life. And if I burn out in a year and a half, what am I going to do? Am I going to be a greeter at Walmart? Like, what am I going to do? So is your workload something you can maintain healthily for yourself over the long term? Is that something you're going to be able to do? If we are being pushed, are we being adequately compensated? So if we have a rush deadline, okay, but are we being adequately compensated by that for rush fees or overtime or whatever it is? Are we being respected in that way? And finally, will taking on this project cause us physical or mental harm? I have hurt myself performing my heart out for people who, when I ended up having life-altering, permanent surgery on my left shoulder because I pushed myself beyond my limits to perform for somebody who, when that happened to me, will not even respond to an email. Are we doing that to ourselves? And if you are, you're not alone. I did it. I had to get like major reconstructive surgery on my shoulder because I played violin to the point where when I put my violin down, my shoulder dislocated and my rotator cuff said, no, I don't work here anymore. I played that hard and that long for somebody who will not respond to my emails now. Are you doing that to yourself? That's not reasonable. Don't do it to yourself. And if you are doing it, stop. Thank you, Tracy. So that is what reasonable looks like or doesn't look like. So how do we turn down work that we don't feel is reasonable? Like, it's hard. So when should we say absolutely not? Well, the work isn't reasonable in the timeline given. I'm sorry, I can't edit your 80,000 word manuscript in 2 days. Sorry, not happening. The pay is not equal to what they're asking for. If they're asking for your time and energy in a rush thing where you would have to work 12-hour days and not speak to your partner, not speak to your kids, do nothing but work, well, then are they paying you for that privilege for a short period of time or not? I've had people pick up, I've had to pick up clients, or I've had the pressure to pick up clients because I'm broke when I don't know enough about the subject to be able to edit it accurately. Like, someone's like, oh, you're an editor, you know words, can you edit this like my PhD dissertation in chemistry? I had somebody, I've had people try and like pressure me to do that, and the answer is no. I don't know anything about chemistry, and maybe I could make the words make sense, but I don't even understand half the terms they're using or how they're supposed to be formatted, so I wouldn't take that job. You can say no to that. Right, exactly. Like, you can say no to that. You should say no to that. It's not good for you or good for the client. And then, like, would this work cause you psychological or mental harm? Like, I mentioned I have PTSD. I have looked at manuscripts before where editing it would cause me significant emotional and psychological distress, and it wouldn't be healthy for me. I couldn't do it, and the idea that I should have to weighed really heavily on me. And I didn't want to say no because I needed the money, but at the same time, editing it made me a mess. You should turn that job down. Partially because if you are spending the entire time you're editing deeply upset about the content you're editing, you aren't going to be focused on the word choice, and you're not going to be doing your job as an editor very effectively. It's not going to work. So not only is it going to cause you deep distress and pain and harm, but it's also not going to serve the client very well. They should work with somebody for whom that material is not deeply problematic and like triggering, because that person will be able to be more focused and have more clarity on it. When to say no if a client doesn't respect your boundaries or you. I have had clients try and call me at all hours of the night or all hours of the day to have long phone conversations and not understand that I don't want to talk on the phone. I've had people try. Or I've had people send me machine gun emails like, is my book done? Is my book done? Is my book done? Is my book done? Like every 5 minutes. And it's like, I understand you're anxious, but also please kindly fuck all the way off. Forgive my French, but oh dear God, no. Like, I have dealt with those people. And if you feel like somewhere in the bottom of your gut, you're like, this client is going to be a nightmare, turn the job down. Save yourself. Turn the job down. Like, you can do it nicely, but say no. And finally, you don't like the project. Like, You know, like I mentioned earlier, like the idea of me editing a corporate manifesto on marketing practices in Indonesia, like, could I do an adequate job of it? Probably. But it would feel like rubbing a cheese grater on my brain the entire time. It would be horrible for me. So I would rather not edit that project. If I was like, okay, it's either this or eat, fine. But I would really rather not. And you're allowed to say, that does not sound like something I would enjoy working on. So I'm going to turn that client down and maybe help them find somebody else who'd be a better fit for them. Because you can always say, I don't think I would be a good fit for this project. I don't think that this would work really well for me. Let me see if I can help you find somebody who would be a better fit for you. And that engenders goodwill and sounds like you're doing them a favor when you're really doing yourself a favor. So never be afraid to be like, I know somebody who this would be perfect for. Don't be afraid to do that. And when that person talks about you again, they'll be like, yeah, they helped me find my editor who I love, so definitely talk to them. I've had that happen before. Sorry, there's another cat on my desk, and she's being cute and problematic at the same time. Now that we've covered the points in time where we're like, nah, we're just going to say no to this. Like the answer to this is just going to be a big nah, brah. Let's take a look at times when we should push ourselves a little outside of our comfort zone. Like where we should kind of nudge ourselves, because there will be times when we're like, ooh, I don't know if I should do this, or I don't know if I can do this, and we should kind of step outside our comfort zone. The first time, I mean, as much as I say turn people down, as much as I encourage people to turn down, no, go back. As much as I encourage people to turn down work that isn't compatible with them, if you really need the money, like I just mentioned, like if I don't take this project, I'm not eating this month, or I can't pay my bills, that's a tough one. You might have to make that evaluation and decide, is this something that I can do? Is this something that's going to be adequate for me? And is this something that I'm going to be capable of handling? And yeah, sure, we can definitely look into creating a group for this. And I agree that if somebody's really problematic, I would actually more be inclined to do an editor's beware thread about them than I would be inclined to send them to somebody else. But if it's just something that you don't think you're a good fit for, helping them find somebody else is a good thing. If somebody's problematic, disrespectful, a jerk or whatever, it is okay to fire them and not give them a referral. That's fine. You're allowed to do that. So if somebody's awful and you're like, I don't want I will not inflict this on anybody. I wouldn't even send them to like the EFA board. I'd be like, good luck. Check Fiverr. I hear they're great, which I know is really mean of me, but still. So when to push yourself, I have pushed myself at times because I felt a particular client or a particular project was really worth it. Like the conference, for example. Doing this conference was a huge push for me, really difficult, but it was 100% worth it. And it is really important to me. But like if the client or the work is worth the extra effort based on your history, and like I've done free edits for a client of mine who really just needed help, and they've been a great client of mine for years. They're a good friend, and I've helped them. I just noticed there are questions in the Q&A. I will get to that in a minute when I finish the when should you push yourself slide, and then I will look at that. Sorry about missing those. I will get to you. I'm not ignoring you on purpose. Third, to push yourself, sometimes we have to push ourselves a little bit because this might get us into an area that is really worth being into. So I might take a slightly lower rate than I normally would if I was going to edit with a client who I thought would be really good for my career or something like that. Like I might be willing to compromise a little bit in order to get into a company or with a client or whatever that I think is really going to be helpful. Third, if you want to do a rush job, you can. It can be really hard. It can be destructive, but if you have adequate recovery time afterwards, it may be worth it. That's going to be something you have to check in with yourself about, though. Then compensation for the work is equal to the work, so a really hefty rush job might be a nightmare to get done in time, but if you are really being compensated very well for it, and the client is respecting that, and respecting your expertise and your time by giving you the money you deserve for it, might be worth pushing yourself. But don't do that. Don't kill yourself for a client who won't pay for it, okay? Let me tell you, do not overextend yourself for the client who would not respond to your email if you needed help. And finally, if something you're doing really supports your values or your worldview, like this conference does, it's really heavy, but you know what? It really is important to me, and it meant a lot, so I've pushed myself pretty hard to get this done, but I think it's really given me back in value in spades, way more than I have necessarily put into it to some extent. Like the exchange rate is really good emotionally. So yes, exactly. So the exchange rate on this energy and the exchange rate on this experience is worth the push. I think I have one more slide here. It's the how to say no. That is just how to phrase a professional email. I mentioned this briefly. This is the last one, then I'll get to the questions. Saying no, there are a lot of ways, like thank the person for their interest in a way that acknowledges their project. So thank you for asking me to edit your your 300,000 word vampire dinosaur erotica. I appreciate that, but I'm not going to do it. And give a really short decline. Like there is a very short way to just don't go into it. Don't give them a lot. And if you're feeling extra spicy, take the email you want to write and then put it in ChatGPT and say, please phrase this professionally. And it will spit out something that sounds professional and be not anywhere near as spicy as you feel like you want to be. And I've found that helpful and kind of therapeutic. The example on the right-hand side of one of these turning people down politely is, hi, Rob, thank you so much in your interest in working with me. Unfortunately, I am not a good fit for your project at this time, as I do not edit vampire dinosaur erotica and work primarily in science editing. Regards, E. Like, that is a perfectly fair turn down, perfectly fair email to say, no thank you. So that is the end of the slideshow. Let me get into your, yes, the email despicer, entirely correct. Let me get into your questions and take a look at those just to make sure I get to vampire dinosaur erotica. Yeah, it's become a meme in my writing group. I'm not going to explain it. Okay, so being able to slip in and out of, okay, that's somebody else. That is something else. So these are questions from the previous thing. How do I get out of a project like this if I couldn't spot red flags without burning bridges? That's a difficult, that's a really difficult thing. Like I said, with the thing here, the saying no, you could send a short, polite email. You could always say to the client, I really appreciate, the time that we've worked together, even if that's not necessarily true, but you can just try and be nice, like de-spicify it, but say, look, this relationship isn't working, this isn't a good fit for me, and I don't feel that I can provide you the level of quality that your project deserves, and either here's a refund or after this point, I'll refund you up to the work I've done, because you should not at any point refund money for work you have already done unless you have done it wrong somehow, like egregiously wrong, like you did the wrong type of edits for a client, like they hired you for copy editing and you did dev editing by mistake. Like you should not refund money unless you made a mistake like that. Or you completely blew a deadline or something. Like if you did that, sure, refund them for work you've already done. But outside that, do not refund money for work you have done, no matter how much you kind of think you should, maybe because they're mad. Don't do it. They don't deserve that. Yes, and absolutely it does have the same energy as all due respect, because that is entirely it. And yeah, I'm not in any way talking down about the vampire dinosaur erotica thing. That is a joke from my server. It was made by an erotica author. So I am not in any way disparaging erotica. It is a fully valid and respectable genre, and I have many close friends who work in it. So it's become a meme in our server that I have to slip that into everything. So that's why it's here. Congratulations, you are now part of it. Are there any questions that anybody has here, or that they would like to have me address or answer, or anything I can use? Q&A popped up. Oh man, RSD. So Ratika has asked, how do we manage or move ahead when RSD makes you When RSD makes you the person who doesn't answer emails in a timely manner, that is hard. I would set aside time in the day to deal with emails. Like for me, the way I handle emails is first thing in the morning, I wake up, I open my email inbox, I deal with the emails that are in, I do like a net zero type of thing in my email inbox. I save the ones that need to be saved and everything else just gets gone. So otherwise my email inbox becomes mail fulu and it's horrible. So I delete everything that doesn't need to be there, deal with the things that are there, and then the rest of the day is fine. It's sort of like, I know the eating the frog thing doesn't work so well for neurodivergent people because we need to build up some dopamine first. So if you have to like schedule that email time a little later in the day because you don't like your email inbox and it freaks you out, that's okay. But setting a time to like, all right, emails get done at 10 a.m. on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, or whatever it is, like whatever the frequency feels right to you, and be upfront about that with your clients. You can tell them, I deal with emails only a certain few days a week. So please do not be surprised if I don't respond to your email immediately. Like, be honest with your clients about it. So that way the expectation is not that you are going to be looking at your email inbox all day. Exactly. Great job, Kath. Nikki, if you decide to change your niche, but you're not in a position to update your website, how do you deal with that? Personally, I have my website set up so that I can always update it. If I have to pay somebody to update my website, I'm screwed. I use WordPress for that so that I always have access to editing it. And I advise that to every person who has a website. Nate says he might be willing to help. But to everyone who has a website, I advise that you have a website on a platform that allows you to edit for exactly that reason. Like you're changing niches, you don't offer a service anymore. But if somebody does approach you about a service you don't provide anymore, you can say, I don't have the ability to update, or I haven't updated my website yet. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but that is not a service I offer at this time, and maybe pass them off to an editing organization or something where they can find somebody, or if you know someone who does it, pass it on down the line. So that would be how I would handle it. Build up the dopamine. Yes, that is absolutely a thing. I will gladly talk to you about that afterwards because that is a thing. Building up the dopamine before you do a hard thing is a thing. Eating the frog doesn't always work for people who are neurodivergent. That was answered. Let's see. Do I have any specific tips for approaching authors we want to work with? If it's, okay, so it depends on how you find them. If it's on Facebook or whatever, if you know they don't have an editor, you might be like, hey, I'm an expert in this kind of writing and I see you're looking for an editor. Can I do a sample edit for you? And do a sample edit, and like I do 1,000 words for free out of the middle of somebody's book. And usually the offer of a free small service is something that people like and is considered a gift, so you are not asking for something from them, and that usually eases the social interaction a little. Hannah has asked, for those who edit around full-time jobs, do I have any suggestions about avoiding burnout and protecting personal time? Yes, schedule your editing. Be like, all right, I edit at these hours on these days, and outside of that, I have a life, so I'm going to go hang out with my kids. And again, you want to make sure that you are upfront with your clients about that. Like, be straightforward about the fact that, like, I have a full-time day job and I'm editing around this, so please understand that my timeline looks a little different than somebody who might be doing this full-time. So just be honest and straightforward. Like, you can tell your clients, these are my days that I'm available, and this is the kind of timeline I provide, so that they're not surprised by it. And if they don't like that timeline, there are other editors, unless you are absolutely desperate for the job. But it's okay to tell a client, hey, this is the time I have. Like, if you have Comcast come to your house, aren't you sitting there all day, every day, waiting for Comcast to show up because you're working on their time? Or if you show up at the grocery store after it closes, they're not going to open the doors to let you in. We don't need to be different. We can be like, these are my hours. This is when I work. That's it. You know? How about authors of books we've read? Dana, I'd be careful with that unless you've developed a relationship with that author, because approaching them unsolicited for editing will probably go over like a lead balloon because they will take that as an attack on their person, an attack on their writing, and get bad feels about it. So I recommend against, like, if I buy a book on Amazon and it's absolute garbage and it needs editing and it's just horrendous, I'm not probably going to go to that author and be like, so I bought your book and it was a hot flaming mess. Let me edit it for you. I don't feel like that would go over well. Sadly, I do not have a secret method for that. I just, I leave a bad review. Yeah, so that, you want to, like, I would rather authors approach me than me approach authors. The only time I will approach an author about doing editing for them is if I see on social media that they're looking for an editor or asking for advice on editing. Like, if I see one of the authors I follow on TikTok saying, hey, I'm getting ready to hire an editor, I could use some advice, what do you look for in an editor, etc. I will engage with that video, tell them what to look for, and mention that I'm an editor, and I'd be happy to talk with them in depth. That kind of thing is great. So go, like, limit it to places where they're soliciting advice. If they aren't asking for advice, don't give it. Because it comes across as, like, preachy and self-important, and I'm better than you, and since hierarchy is a thing for neurotypicals, it will create bad feels. So just don't approach people who haven't asked you, or who aren't soliciting. Because they'll get pissed off, and then you'll be caught in the crossfire. Yes, a bad review. I leave bad reviews on books that are not well written because I considered it a service to people who are reading that book. I'm not mean. Like, I'm not cruel to people, but I'm honest. If a book needs better editing, I will say so. And I've even left reviews that were not amazing on people who I know, whose books I've read. I try to be, like, I'm kind, but I'm honest. I usually just try and focus on, like, the good parts of it in the review, but I don't lie about whether or not I liked something. We have 1 minute left. I think that's about everything, so thank you so much for coming. I hope this was helpful. And yes, I absolutely leave reviews. I don't leave reviews on my clients' books because that's a conflict of interest and Amazon would take it down. So I can't leave reviews on my clients' books because that's, that's a little funky, but I leave reviews on every other book I read. Yeah, like, I have no problems leaving reviews. I do it. Like, my Goodreads is, I leave a lot of reviews, and I review spicy books, and I usually start those reviews with, sorry, Mom, that you have to see I read this, but here's my opinion on this porn. So that's a thing. My mother gets a kick out of that because she follows me on Goodreads, so, she did that to herself. But yeah, that is everything I have. If anybody has any questions or wants to talk to me more in depth, I'm going to be really busy during the sessions because I'm recording half of the sessions today. I've got people recording the other half, so I might be a little busy until we break, but please feel free to DM me, message me. I'll be around, so catch up with me if you want to talk more or if you have questions about anything. I really appreciate all of you, and I hope this was helpful to you.